my house right here. My name is Ronna Elfers, and I wanted to come today to express my condolences to your family. This has been a tragic incident. There's been bloodshed here on my property, and you're all welcome to be here. I want you to be here on my property, and you're welcome to have this memorial. My thought was maybe sometime in the future we might want to do something more that's more permanent, like maybe a rose bush that could be planted along the sidewalk here that would be a more lasting memorial.
Right on. Thank you very much. Thank you. We really appreciate that.
That's right. No more. Boy, I tell you, my brother. No more. I'm sorry that he had to be the sacrificial lamb, but I know him. He would have it no other way if he knew it would spark something for the city. I believe we have an opportunity to have a template for the rest of the nation. Moving without emotion, on emotion, but with straight resolve, without a quitting spirit, with fire, tenacity, and determination. We're going to do something different here, and we're going to keep the heat on. They say it's cold in Seattle this time of year. I can't tell. Seems like the heat is on right now. And if we keep rising our voice to a percentage, where it reaches the mayor, where it reaches the governor, where it reaches every major official in this city, because it's not just the police. Somebody has to tell them what to do. It's those people that we need to hear. We need to shake Seattle, Washington, and not only they hear, but the rest of the country hears, and the world hears that we are here, and it's not going to be this time that we will walk quietly into the night. Not this time! 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 Not this time!
I'm Shay's sister. My name is Davita Briscoe. So let me first start off by saying Che Taylor was a man, not a convicted felon. Everything else a criminal. Everything else that the media has tried to demonize him to be. Che was a man. He was my brother. He was someone's son. He was an uncle. He was a family member. He was a cousin. He was a father. Those are the things that we know Che as being. Che was loving. He was caring. He was sensitive. He spent his time with his family. We had birthday parties. I have pictures of my brother coming to my daughter's birthday parties and skating with them. That's the type of Che, promising my 4 little girls to buy them Barbie dolls, that he would bring them a Barbie doll. That's who Che was. He was a warm person that could light up any room. He was witty and he was funny. Yes. He could tell a story and have you cracking up laughing all day long. I know my brother spent time in prison, and I spent time went to every prison that he's ever been to. I've spent time with him, visiting him for 22 years because I love him. And he loves his family. He protected us. He would stand up for us. And he was in our corner, and he would have our back, and we would have his. He worked for Amazon in a warehouse, and he received a regular check. That's what he did with his life. People don't know that, but we have pictures of him with his hard hat on at work. We have those pictures. We have pictures of my brother being a family man and an uncle and a father. So that's who Che was. That's who Che was. He brought life to us. He was our life. And the day my brother died, not only was I outraged, but I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm deeply hurt. I'm disgusted. I saw my brother be gunned down like an animal. Actually, this country treats animals better than they treat black men.
That's right.
They'll stop traffic to save an animal, but gun our men down like it's like they're dogs, worse than dogs, actually. But that's what my brother has been criminalized. I've seen all type of news reports that he doesn't deserve. Pretty much he's guilty of his own murder. That's the way that the media has painted him. Never calling him a man. Never calling him a man. Even making us sit outside the hospital for over 2.5 hours. Not even allowing us to come into the hospital. Not even his wife called the police on us and said we were causing a disturbance. The Seattle Police Department took over the whole, they wouldn't even announce his death until after 4 hours and wouldn't have not allowed us to see his body. Took his body to the medical examiner before we could even identify him. Before we could identify his body, they took his body. We got to Harborview. They wouldn't allow us into the hospital and told us that we had to call the Seattle Police Department to give immediate family names to the hospital in order to be entered into. Made us sit in our cars. Wouldn't give us a hospital room, a family room to sit in, nothing. The only two people that the hospital would let in was his wife and me, and that was over 2.5 hours later. And they still didn't let us see his body. They told us that his body wasn't there. It's a cover-up. It's a cover-up.
As it has been many times before.
Many times before. My brother was shot in his back while he was following their commands. He was doing exactly, and so that's a conflicting story, that he wasn't following commands, because what we see on the video is him following commands.
That was their first story.
That was their first story. Now the second story is he was reaching for a gun. But we don't see anything on the tape where they're, okay, I'm sorry, but
No, don't talk about that.
I'm just angry.
Other questions?
All right. My name is R.I.P Taylor. I'm Shay's older brother. I love him so very much. I've talked to the media yesterday, a few media outlets, and I explained to them that, you know, initially when I heard about it, I live in Los Angeles, and of course it was devastating. You know, I was frantic, you know, as anyone who loves someone would be. You know, I don't think that story is exotic, as I say, rare. I think anybody can relate to a loss of anybody that you love and what that would do to you. You know, how devastated one would be. And so I was devastated. But I'm here now to find some justice for my brother. I saw the video, and of course I was distraught by it, but if I can be transparent with you, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked because you see this happening all over this country. And as of late, other Americans outside of Black Americans are seeing what we've been seeing for many, many years. We've seen it in our community for hundreds of years. And it just so happens that at this time we have the technology that our cameras can show some of the things to the rest of the world that we've been experiencing. So I wasn't shocked that they would get out and, in my perspective of things, kill my brother. Yes, they did have on tactical uniforms and assault rifles. And I think that it appeared to me that they were coming to kill something, and I think they met their objective. They were in unmarked cars, and we know, and per what I heard when I was in Los Angeles from the chief saying that the reason and what happened was there was a suspicious car that they were following. And, you know, I think one of the worst things that happens, you know, in our society is that when a tragedy happens like this, the police has the opportunity to set the narrative, you know. And for a long time, they've been trusted amongst most Americans, not as much in our communities. But when you have an opportunity to set the narrative, and the media, who trust the police, who've had relationship with them, spin that narrative without actually giving us due process or giving us the opportunity to have a different story, it's hard to dig out of that mountain of that narrative years swarm because the power of the media and the authority of the police. And so this is the process that we are in right now, digging out of a narrative that was placed forward that has always been in this country. You know, someone says, well, you know, he had a criminal record. Maybe he did. And but we see around the country that doesn't always, that's not the situation always, because Tamir Rice was a little boy. So we see that even though there's always an excuse of why one should be shot. There's always an excuse, you know. And I told one of the news people yesterday that, you know, it's really not a black story. It's really an American problem. And what gives me some type of hope is that even though mostly black people are affected by this, that there are a lot of white Americans that are standing up with us all over this country. And that makes me feel a little support, and I appreciate that. Now, of course, when you go through things, you lash out and you have distaste in your mouth. And if you're not careful, you can begin to despise all white people. Not me in general, but viewing the troubles over the years, it could make you feel that way. But when you see white people, white Americans, that are standing in truth and standing for some of the injustices that we see, it makes your heart feel good. So I'm happy about that. I love my brother. I know that you guys don't know him, but I can tell you a little bit about him. I loved him. He had $1 million smile, and he had a major, beautiful, big heart. He would help anybody. And yes, he did 22 years. And when he got out, I explained to somebody, you know, it takes a process. Redemptive, having a redemptive story takes a process. It doesn't happen overnight. After being in a condition of 22 years in a place that makes you think differently about things, makes you operate differently than being in the free world. So when you get out, it takes a process. You just don't automatically become who the police must have thought he should have been. Perfect. And I said yesterday, you know, if the criteria for a man's life to live in the police eyes is for a man to be perfect, then I guess only the police will be alive. I mean, they consider themselves perfect. If that is indeed the criteria, you know. So I'm going to open it up for any questions, but I just wanted to share my thoughts about the situation. I'm here to go to war. I'm here to go to war.
As many of you now know, a man by the name of Che Taylor was shot and killed by Seattle police officers on February the 21st, 2016. According to an article done by the Seattle Times on February the 22nd, SPD said Taylor was armed and unresponsive to the commands of police officers. Furthermore, he reached for a gun despite being surrounded. When the officers saw him going for his gun, they opened fire on Taylor. Pretty cut and dry, right? He reached for a gun and the police had no choice but to shoot him. Let's, however, take a look at the evidence.
Get on the ground! Hands up! Right now! Hands up! Shot fired! Shot fired! Hands up! Get on the ground! Hands up! Right now! Hands up! Shot fired! Shot fired! Hands up!
Everything else that Taylor does cannot be seen on camera, and all we have is the testimony of the officers and the civilian. But what we can see is that he actually does obey the officers. He was not unresponsive, as reported. Did he reach for a gun? According to the police and the civilian, yes. Question: where was the civilian and how did they see Taylor reach for a small gun from their angle? We have absolutely no information on the civilian. In the police write-up, Taylor was described as being clearly armed, but when Police Captain Sean O'Donnell was asked if Taylor was actually armed during the incident, he said he was not sure.
He said he was not armed. Was he in fact armed? That's still, we're looking at that. Clearly, it's a crime scene that has just occurred, and we're taking a look to see if the suspect was armed or not.
How do you go from we are not sure if he was armed on the 21st and by the 22nd he was clearly armed Typically, testimony given closest to the time of the actual event is more reliable than the stories that follow. So clearly the story changed from one day to the next. How do you open fire on a man with rifles, administer CPR, put him on a gurney, send him to the hospital, and still not know if he was armed during that shooting? The Seattle Times said detectives served search warrants as part of the investigation and recovered Taylor's gun. Recovered it when? And from where? According to the Telegraph, a news outlet based in London, the police told them that they recovered the gun from Taylor at the hospital. So you mean he rode in the ambulance with the gun all the way to Harborview? Does that make any sense at all? As the smear campaign began to dehumanize Taylor, pictures of the firearm and holster surfaced. The style of this holster is an outside of the waistband holster, which means it's not designed to be carried inside of a person's pants, thus making it easier to get to, but also easier to see. Why would a man out on parole walk around illegally carrying a gun outside of his pants? Many people bring up his record as grounds for the shooting. However, cops are not allowed to use deadly force just because someone is a known felon. So bringing up his record is quite simply a way to dehumanize him. But in America, even free felons who have served their time have rights. Furthermore, there is far less coverage of Officer Michael Spaulding's past, in which he shot a man with schizophrenia in another controversial case a few years back. Here is the bottom line. 1. Cops said before the footage came out that Taylor was unresponsive to their commands. He wasn't. 2. After Taylor gets down on the ground, we cannot see his actions. 3. The civilian is a mystery. 4. The earliest testimony of the police captain says they were unsure if Taylor was armed at the time of the shooting. The next day, however, the story had changed and he was now clearly armed. 5. The Telegraph said the gun was recovered at the hospital. As time goes on, SPD will undoubtedly frame the narrative in a way that favors their organization. However, when you find gross contradictions in a story over a period of time, someone is lying.